It's rare that a studio makes a big budget blockbuster film that's artistic, entertaining, and thoroughly interesting. But there is one studio movie from last year that really stood out to me as being my favorite studio movie from 2016. That movie is Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Undoubtedly, before you watch to the end, some of you are going to dislike this video, which is fine. I mean, you do you. But hear me out, alright? I've got a lot of really in depth reasons. As an audience member, you need to know that Batman's parents died. That's the whole reason for him to be Batman. And besides that, there's an expectation in filmmaking that you shouldn't just rely on other material to tell your story for you. So what's a solution for showing the audience something that most of them have already seen in Batman Begins or Batman Returns or a multitude of animated movies? You make it the most beautifully shot and edited version of that scene to have appeared in a movie so far. You condense it down to play over the opening credits. You communicate the scene the most efficient way possible because you know the audience has seen it already. But the scene also serves another purpose. It's a thematic taste test of what's to come. Not the entire movie is dark, but this scene is, and it's similar to how the first scene of Gummo is the main character drowning a cat. It serves the purpose of telling the audience we're not afraid to go there. It sets the boundaries of consequences for the rest of the movie. Aside from older Bruce Wayne's narration, Martha is literally the second line of dialogue in the entire movie. If you're complaining that that sort of plot device came out of nowhere, it's in the first scene of the movie. The second scene of the movie takes place near the end of the previous film, but it's from a different perspective. This idea of different perspectives is something I'll come back to later, but for right now, focus on this. This scene and the one before it is presenting a similar theme of actions and their consequences. In this movie, there are consequences. Things matter. Things affect each other. Everything that happens in this scene affects the rest of the movie. I've often talked about this film and how, by comparison, Captain America Civil War is much more insulting or pandering to its audience. How, even though it's a movie, most of the reveals are dialogue based and how it doesn't really take advantage of cinema as a medium. Right here, with just a look, we know Bruce hates Superman. Although he had the brief conversation with the girl, she didn't say, "Superman killed my parents." Bruce asked her and she pointed, the camera slowly tilted up to show a scene of destruction. The way this moment is done is something that could only be done in a film. Show, don't tell. And here we're back to this idea of another perspective. Throughout this film, there are scenes that take place from perspectives other than the main characters. For the purposes of this video, the main characters are Superman, Bruce Wayne, and Lex Luthor. Although there are many scenes that take place from the POV of other minor characters, every single scene serves to either advance Bruce's motivation, Lex's motivation, or Superman's motivation. The inclusion of these scenes make the world that the main characters live in feel tangible and real. You see the cops in action, you see the divers in action, so now everybody other than the main characters seems at least a little real because we've seen the smaller characters engaging in their professions. It's a wonderful storytelling device if you want the scale to feel as bombastic, large, and epic as possible. Again, such a beautiful moment that could not have been done outside of a film. This scene has no dialogue at all, but now we know there is kryptonite and somebody's looking for it. Although later they will tell us what the kryptonite does, we've already been shown it first, and we already know it's something powerful by the way this field scientist approaches it and the way that the scene is shot and edited. A movie doesn't have to be dialogue-free to be great cinema, especially not a commercial, broad, appealing film such as this one. But showing and not telling should absolutely be prioritized if the film is supposed to be cinematic and not a radio play. If you want cleverly written dialogue, I'm sure there's a playwright in your city that has cheap shows with well-written dialogue. That's not what I look for in a movie. I don't want to watch a radio play.
They held hearings about what happened.
If you've ever taken our screenwriting class, then they'll tell you that the primary conflicts of the movie should be set up in the first 30 minutes. We're about 18 minutes into this movie, and we've already set up all of the major conflicts. Bruce Wayne doesn't like Superman. He considers him a menace. Superman is being heavily criticized, and he doesn't know if he's a good guy. Someone, we later figure out it's Lex, is looking for kryptonite. We don't know why yet, but that's it. Those are the primary conflicts in this movie, and every subsequent scene will be directly feeding into one of these conflicts. And here's another scene revolving around one of the main characters, this time Batman, but from the perspective of a working class average person. These police officers are real people, and all the government personnel in this movie subsequently feel more like real people because we've seen the cops. All of Alfred's dialogue in this scene, along with Bruce's dismissive attitude, implies that this Bruce is much older than previous iterations, that he's lost his faith in the system that he was once protecting. Bruce Wayne is basically the main character in every noir movie now, rumbling to himself about how the world's gone crazy. That he can't stop all the crime he wants to, but he still tries because even though he can't stop a purse robbery, he can stop genuinely evil people. If you're one of the people wondering why Batman kills people in this movie, that's why. He's a post-Vietnam Batman. He's Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver. He's every anti-hero that continues to do their job because they think they're the only one that can do it, while paradoxically also believing that what they're doing, or the majority of it at least, is hopeless. So here we meet Lex Luthor. I've heard people describe his character in this movie as awkward, over the top, or cringeworthy, but I don't think that these people were really paying attention. As we'll find out later, he isn't Lex Luthor, he's Lex Luthor Jr. You ever see an interview with somebody who got a ton of money or fame young? You ever see the aftermath of a child star's career? Have you seen any of those recent interviews with Eddie from That's So Raven? That's a real guy, and he's just as weird as Lex is in this movie. You ever see any of Trump's kids or any of the Kardashians? If you gain access to practically unlimited resources before you become a mature adult, you're going to have poor social skills. You're going to be eccentric. You're not going to be able to relate to people. And these things are exactly what Lex in this movie is. He's a guy who was never told no as a kid, who always got the biggest and best and got just what he wanted. That's why he wants to control Superman so badly. He sees him as the one resource, an unprecedented resource that he cannot use. The one kid on the playground with toys he doesn't have that he can't own. I've also seen a lot of people personally opposed to Eisenberg as Luthor, and they wanted Bryan Cranston or something to play Lex Luthor. First of all, their choice would have been so boring, and Cranston wouldn't have offered anything that we haven't seen from Kevin Spacey or Gene Hackman. Bryan Cranston might not have been bad, but he would have been so uninteresting. Jesse's character perfectly embodies the out-of-touch Beverly Hills or Silicon Valley asshole that would have access to all these funds in the real world, or the marginally real world. Besides that, he's basically a foil to Bruce Wayne and Superman in this movie. He also lost his parents. He also has access to a ton of money like Bruce Wayne. He also can relate to people well. It's not because of powers like Superman, but it's because of his access to resources that others wouldn't dream of. Also, physically, Jesse Eisenberg is relatively short, very thin with fair hair, and he looks nothing like either of them. Lex in this movie is not as naturally talented as Superman is, but he also hasn't used his resources well or miraculously to improve himself like Bruce Wayne has. He's both of what they're not, but he also has similarities to both of them. Also, you gotta love that the beginning of his theme is the same as Superman's on a different instrument, except that the third and fourth notes go lower instead of going higher like Superman's. Ba-da, ba-da. And this part of his theme, my god, it's like Dracula or something. So dark and orchestral, he's an epically evil figure, and this music signifies that. Here we see Martha's name yet again, and a man-bat bursts from behind it to strangle Bruce. This is obviously a visual metaphor for how he feels that he's become something he doesn't recognize, and although his parents' death didn't cause this, the eventuality of him being Batman for 20 years as a direct result of his parents' death did cause him to turn into this twisted monster with only a small amount of humanity left.
And knowledge is power. And I am... no. No, what am I? What was I saying?
And here's another example of Lex's inability to socialize like a regular person. Have you ever seen Elon Musk give a speech? Lex's mannerisms of speaking here aren't unrealistic at all for somebody who's been raised the way he has. This montage is yet another example of something that could only have been accomplished through cinema. Superman, similar to how Batman started feeling years ago, is unsure of himself and of the help he's actually doing for the world, but he does his job anyways, hoping that it will help. This scene is a great way to show visually what Batman is afraid Superman will turn the world into. Is it necessary? Arguably no, but it shows us the crazy threat that Batman thinks Superman is, how paranoid Batman is, and also, the scene is worth it for this one shot. Again, is this necessary? I don't know what the plans are for the sequels, so maybe this scene will feel more in context when the Flash movie comes out or the Justice League one. I have faith that this will tie in well, we just don't have context for it yet.
We've seen what promises are worth. How many good guys are left? How many stayed that way?
And Bruce's statement right here is exactly why we saw that desert future scene earlier. That is what he's referring to. That's what he's afraid of. Here we go, one of the best car chase scenes that's ever been put on film. One of the complaints this movie gets is that it's too long, but can you honestly say that this scene would have been just as impactful had it been right after or right before another action scene? We need all the time preceding this to gestate the action, have it make sense. Batman has been looking for this kryptonite the entire movie. Now we're going to get some catharsis of him kicking ass trying to get it, what we've been waiting for the entire movie thus far. If there hadn't been this much time between the action, the scene would have felt essentially meaningless, with no real feeling of consequence or the sense that what the characters are doing matters, like some action scenes in some other movies. This is the only dialogue in this entire car chase scene. You're so focused on the visuals that you don't need to be told what's going on. You can see it. That's why it's a good cinema and not a radio play. Our two main characters are finally meeting for the first time. They technically already met as Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, but this is them meeting in their true unfiltered forms. And it's done in such an epic way with slow motion, with a loud choir score and extreme close-up, Superman abrasively tearing the top off Batman's Batmobile, invading the space. Bruce Wayne has already made it clear how much he thinks of Superman as a weapon who's invaded the human world as an alien. Physically getting in Batman's space, in his car, and threatening him the first time they meet is not going to make Batman feel settled or safe or comfortable. Superman thinks that Batman is just going to get in the way and inconvenience him. Superman is, for once, using his almost almighty power as a threat, and it feels so good to hear him use those powers as an intimidation tactic. This moment of Superman actually using his powers to threaten somebody else is what the Senator, Lex, and Batman, and a lot of the world at large in this movie has been afraid of Superman doing the whole movie, and it's a great moment to show it.
Tell me. Do you bleed?
This line might be a little cheesy, but God, it's so good. It perfectly expresses Batman's arrogance of his own importance and his anger with Superman. Such a simple line could have been done really badly by somebody with less acting ability. Batman doesn't need to say, "I'm gonna hurt you." Asking, "Do you bleed?" and then "you will" implies what he's going to do. You can trust the audience to, think like a person. Yet another moment that required no dialogue at all to communicate, effectively using cinema to its actual potential and not dumbing it down for what the filmmakers see as a stupid audience. Here's one moment of levity in the film that, although humorous, is somewhat realistic given what we've seen of Lex Luthor in this movie to act like, and serves as a tonal break before an extremely horrifying and traumatizing scene. Come on, look at this shot and tell me this movie doesn't convey emotion purely visually. And look, another brilliant, highly visual montage that communicates everything it needs with no dialogue. Batman is going to use kryptonite to fuck Superman up. The moment you've been waiting the entire movie for is coming soon, so you better get ready, you better download Worldstar Hip Hop, you better get your camera out. A lot of people call this scene out as being out of place, but if you've ever known somebody who's died, someone close to you, especially a parent, when you're faced with a personal crisis later, you ask yourself what they would do in your situation. This is just a visual representation of that, and it segues nicely from Superman talking about his father to Batman talking about his.
They were hunters.
Again, the audience is trusted with the intelligence to complete this thought. We know the implication, you don't have to spell it out for us. No words needed. Purely visual beauty. Jesse's strange pronunciation of "would not let them tell me" is yet another example of how eccentric this Lex is, how many social skills he lacks, and there's another example right after this. When he says, "When you came here, you had an hour," you think, oh, now he's going to tell us how much time is left. But then he says, now it's less. A normal person doesn't talk this way. And if you think the screenwriters just aren't good at writing dialogue, you're wrong. Lex doesn't speak like a normal person, it's extremely intentional. I can 100% guarantee that the Justice League members' inclusion in this film was the result of the studio telling Zack Snyder and the screenwriters that they had to be included. So what did they do? They made the shortest possible scene in order to include them. And other than Wonder Woman, they don't even interact with the main characters. But why would they? For one thing, this film was already criticized as being overly long and filled with stuff that wasn't necessary. They're already going to make an entire fucking movie about the Justice League. I'd much prefer that they meet and interact during the first 45 minutes to an hour of that movie instead of having it feel super rushed in this one. So instead, they have this sort of teaser where Batman and Wonder Woman only watch them from a screen and don't interact with them. It thematically makes far more sense for all of them to first meet in the actual Justice League movie. This is a perfect way to show what the studio required, undoubtedly, to be shown.
Well, here I am. Bruce.
Superman knows Bruce is Batman, and I'm glad they don't spend 100 hours explaining why or how he knows. If you were paying attention, by the way, you figured it out when you heard Alfred at the party. That's not important. Right now, he wants to save his mother. Something I love about the action scenes in this movie, and in most of Zack Snyder's filmography also, is that the majority of these scenes are kept in a very wide shot. You can see that there's choreography, you can see the actors clearly doing the martial arts, and when it cuts, you still preserve screen direction and geography, or you don't change it enough in one shot to the next for it to be jarring.
You're letting him kill Martha.
Here's a major problem people have had with this movie. Man, if only they had hinted to it several times in the movie or shown that Batman thinks Superman is a weapon and that he would perceive this as being some sort of trick until realizing that Superman actually does have a mother because he's human. If only they had shown that earlier in the film.
I need you at that ship. I'll find her. My mother needs me. Wait. I make you a promise. Martha won't die tonight.
Come on, the very quick 2 notes of Superman's theme played when Batman promises him Martha won't die. Yeah, this movie has no emotion. This entire scene is another example of a wide shot action sequence showing Batman dealing with a bunch of bad guys so much better than any movie ever before has. The first dialogue in 4 minutes, but you don't notice because this movie is actually using cinema like as a medium. Throughout this movie, as well as Man of Steel, a very clear effort is made with the shots that are 100% CG, and that the shots could have been done with a real camera. The camera movement in these CG shots is consistent with that of actual camera equipment. This keeps the CG relatively seamless and non-distracting. An exception, however, is made when it comes to Doomsday. His introduction, as well as this shot and a few others, are all CG shots that are done in such an over-the-top, extravagant way that would be incredibly difficult to do with actual camera equipment. This makes these shots stand out and unnatural given the rest of the movie, and further enhance this sort of Frankenstein monster feeling when it comes to Doomsday in this movie. This shot looks like it came right from a comic book. Come on. A direct callback to a flashback scene from Man of Steel. Clark went back in to save the bully, and Superman went back in to get the silver bullet to kill the monster. A somewhat over-the-top music cue just before a scene with a melodramatic score. We're happy that they've been victorious, but our happiness is brief because Superman just died. Finally, a guy that has shown the entire movie to be crazy is going to be in prison. His wealth, his fame, his notoriety, those things aren't going to save him. And here we go with another beautiful, purely cinematic montage that could not have been done in anything with the same effect in any other form of storytelling. And right after that, another incredible, emotional, cinematic montage. Superman has given Batman his faith in humanity back, and Batman doesn't condemn someone to death. He doesn't need to sacrifice his soul anymore. I wish this movie would have ended 3 frames earlier, but again, I am positive that the studio said, Superman can't be dead at the end of the movie, Zack. So, loophole. And based on the promotional materials for Justice League, Superman is going to be absent for a significant portion of that movie, so it's not like the death is meaningless. So now that I've come up with a list of many of the reasons I love this film so much, I can't give every reason I like it, otherwise this video would probably be 5 hours long. But anyways, I'd like to address specifically some criticisms that I've heard about this film that I just feel are not valid. This movie has no color. There are a wide variety of colors and color palettes used in this movie, and each implies a very different meaning or tone. I have no idea how this criticism got started, but I'm convinced that everyone using this criticism either heard someone else use it, didn't actually see the movie, or need to borrow a pair of Logan Paul's 6 shades because they're freaking colorblind. The editing is bad. I have a lot of problems with this statement when it comes to any movie, pretty much, for a couple reasons. The first is that there's no way to verify this. The theoretical version of a movie that isn't edited doesn't exist. So you can say all you want about how it's badly edited because there isn't an unedited movie. The second is that a lot of certain people really don't understand the difference between writing choices and editing choices. If you've seen the ultimate cut of this film, a lot of the sequences are lengthened by an addition of maybe less than 10 shots, which together total maybe 30 seconds in one sequence, or a shot that was halved for the theatrical version is left in its longer version. There's also the addition of many 3 to 4 minute scenes, as most of the scenes of the theatrical version of the film are 3 to 4 minute scenes also. But there really isn't a scene that is 8 minutes long in the ultimate cut and like a minute long in the theatrical version. The majority of the scenes in the film are 3 to 4 minute scenes, and they're written that way. The length of the scene is almost always determined in the writing stage. There are exceptions, and there may be some in this movie, but the changes made in editing just are not as drastic as people seem to think they are, especially for a movie of this size that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Another reason that this complaint isn't really valid is that you're not psychic. What you think the director was trying to infer with the editing, the mood, the tone, the pace, that isn't necessarily the case. They could have something totally different in mind. They could be trying to make you feel depressed or make you feel nauseous or make you feel unsettled. And if you don't like these feelings, then you won't like the editing. But you'll think that the director is making you feel that way unintentionally somehow, and that's bad editing. I guarantee it's not unintentional. You perceive it as bad because you assume that these feelings you get from the editing are an accident, that the scene was actually meant to be heartwarming but just happened to be cynical and wearing you down. That's not an accident. The other reason I hate this criticism is because, and this might feel like a cop-out, this movie was filmed in several countries and in several states in the US, employed hundreds of people, pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into the economy of every place it filmed, and encompassed several years of many people's lives. A movie with a budget of several $100 million, I'm sure, has every version of every scene completely from many angles, and the editor probably started working on the film while they were shooting so that the studio knew what shots it needed pickups. They edited this movie over many months, probably over a year, so I guarantee every editing choice that was made because they made an alternate version of that scene and it didn't properly convey what Zack Snyder or Warner Brothers wanted. If you think for a second that any editing choice made in this movie wasn't raked over with very careful thought and consideration and taking every other take of that scene into account, you're very wrong. No editing choice made was a coincidence or an accident or the result of some last-minute desperation. You didn't like the choices that were made, but that doesn't mean that they just happen to make these choices. It's all very, very intentional. This movie has no emotion. How can you say that with a straight face? Look at the woman describing Superman murdering her family. Look at the scene of the Waynes getting murdered. Look at the montage of Superman saving people. Look at the scene of Superman standing in the burning rubble of the White House. Look at Superman's funeral scene. This movie is dripping with emotion, and if the beautiful cinematography and color choice didn't key you into this, then the amazing score should have. Come on. The plot is too convoluted. It really isn't. Every single scene is directly related to Batman's conflict, Superman's conflict, or Lex Luthor's conflict. Batman wants to kill Superman, Superman wants to prove he's the good guy, and Lex Luthor wants to control Superman. Some of these scenes are from the perspective of those outside of the main characters, but every scene is directly related to one of these goals and their respective character working towards it. The movie's just not fun. I don't know about you, but having a movie where I don't care about any of the characters isn't fun. Having a character say the same 3 words the entire movie isn't fun. Having a character constantly make quips with the people they're fighting isn't fun. Pandering to the audience isn't fun. Not feeling like the filmmaker trusts my level of intelligence isn't fun. These kinds of things constantly remind the viewer that they're watching a movie, and it makes me care about the characters less if I'm constantly being reminded that everything is constructed and nothing matters. I watch movies to be entertained, and someone calling out that what I'm doing is all artificial isn't entertaining to me. Feeling like things actually matter, feeling like actions have consequences, feeling like there are some stakes, that's fun. Speed is a fun movie because the entire time you know that if the bus drops below 55 miles per hour, that shit's gonna blow up. If every 3 minutes somebody pointed out how we're just gonna jump off right before it blows up, don't worry about it, the movie wouldn't be fun. I don't want a bunch of shitty, lazy, cheap, cringe-worthy jokes cluttering up a movie because I want to care about things that are happening. Caring about things is fun. Feeling like things that are happening have consequences is fun. Also, this movie isn't fun? Come on. The Martha thing made no sense. It's alluded to several times in the movie before it happens, and why it's impactful is displayed very obviously. So Batman doesn't think of Superman as a hero or even as a person. He thinks he's just a weapon, the same thing Lex Luthor feels about Superman. When Superman mentions Martha first, Batman thinks that Superman is trying to trick him. But then Bruce gets a bit of his humanity back and remembers the person that's somewhere deep inside his batsuit. And he remembers that Superman also has a mother, that he's also a person. It's a little convenient that they have the same name, sure. But would the scene have worked as well had she not been named Martha? Probably not. But she is, and to say that it came out of nowhere and that it wasn't alluded to, that's nonsense. It's untrue. The Justice League thing felt so forced. I kind of see where you're coming from, but I assure you that was only included because the studio wanted it. Zack Snyder clearly wanted to include as little as possible for this film, with the exception maybe of Wonder Woman, because there's a whole other movie that's probably going to be 2.5 hours long also, that's about the Justice League. So it makes far more sense to put almost everyone's initial meeting in that movie. That's why they're watching The Flash and Aquaman on the screen. That's why they don't directly interact with those guys. That meeting wouldn't make sense in this movie. It would make even less sense than Batman and Wonder Woman seeing the metahumans on a screen through video camera footage. Lex Luthor was way over the top. He really wasn't. Look up any interview with a former child star and you can see how fame and fortune from a young age can really damage someone's social skills and their psyche. He's not Lex Luthor, he's Lex Luthor Jr., and as a character, that's so much more interesting. Overall, I think that the majority of the criticism of this film came from an inherent desire to dislike it. That, like kids in elementary school, any movie perceived as trying too hard is automatically dismissed. It's just a comic book movie, stop being so serious. People like you saying shit like that is depressing. Saying that you should try just good enough to not fail doesn't fly for me. And I'm glad that a filmmaker with much more resources than me is really using them to their fullest potential and is being incredibly ambitious with the cinema. A C- is technically passing, but I don't want a C- movie. I want to watch an A+. I want to feel like the filmmaker in charge of the movie is trying to elevate the genre, that they're trying to try something new. Trying your best and failing is far more respectable than not trying at all. But Zack Snyder, to me, didn't fail in this movie. And I cannot wait to see how he uses the Justice League to make a completely new type of superhero movie, which I know he'll do. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like my video, check out a couple more, maybe? If there's something you want me to review or react to or whatever, put it in the comments, man. Woman thing. Yeah.